Thanks for coming. My name is Hila Bloem, by the way, and I will be the host for tonight. A few words about our distinguished guests. Samantha Chaplin, born in Argentina in 1978. Samantha Chaplin is the author of 3 story collections, which have won numerous awards. She had been translated into 20 languages. Fever Dream is her first novel, and also her first book to appear in Hebrew at Amoved. It is called Merchak Bitachon. It just came out a few days ago. Fever Dream has won her a nomination for last year's Man Booker Prize. It was a finalist for the Mario Vargas Llosa Prize and winner of the Tigre Juan Prize. Earlier on in her career, she has been chosen by Granta, the British literary magazine, as one of the 22 best writers in Spanish under the age of 35. She has recently celebrated 40, and we can safely say that she kept up the excellent work. Please, Samantha, join me. Yishai Sarid was born in 1965 in Tel Aviv. He studied law at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and received a graduate degree in public administration from Harvard University. Sarid has worked in the state attorney's office as a prosecutor for criminal cases. He now works as an attorney in the private sector and also contributes articles to the Hebrew press. Yishai is the author of 5 novels. His second book, Limassol, became an international bestseller, has been translated to 8 languages, won the Grand Prix de Littérature Policière in France, and was shortlisted to the Irish IMPAC Prize. His third book, Naomi's Kindergarten, was shortlisted to the Sapir Literary Prize in Israel. His fourth book, that is called The Third, and I'm sure he did it on purpose because it always gives trouble, won the Bernstein Literary Award. His most recent novel is The Memory Monster, published last year and already translated to several languages. Yishai, please join us. So now, since we have 2 guests, and some of you might know Samantha, but not be familiar with Yishai's work, and some with Yishai, but not with Samantha, I will very shortly introduce the 3 books that we will be referring to most in this discussion, just to get you a little bit oriented in what we talk about. So, Limassol, Yishai's novel, is about a Secret Service interrogator who is dedicated to his work, thwarting suicide bombings, but is suffering from a burnout. He is given an unusual mission. He is to study creative writing with a Tel Aviv author named Daphna, who is active in the peace movement, and through her to reach a poet friend of hers who is terminally ill in Gaza, and whose son is a suspect. He becomes involved in the writer's life, arranges for the poet to be treated in Israel, and also has to save Daphna's son, who has become a drug addict and mixes in dangerous circles. This is Limassol. The Memory Monster is written in the form of a long letter. It is an account written by a young Israeli Holocaust scholar who became a guide on Israeli high school students' tours to the Nazi death camps in Poland. An account addressed to the chairman of Yad Vashem, in which he, the tour guide, tries to explain the violent and embarrassing incident involving him that happened at a death camp. The Memory Monster. I just wanted to add, because it will be relevant to what we speak later on, that in those 2 books, both the heroes are married and have a single child and experience a certain degree of difficulty relating to their sons. And fathering them. Samantha's novel, Fever Dream. In this case, I would start with the setting of the novel. A young woman named Amanda lies dying in a rural hospital clinic. A boy named David sits beside her. She's not his mother, he's not her child, and together they try to reconstruct the events that had led to this situation. Now we'll take you back in time and forward in the book, because what I'm saying now will be only discovered later on. Amanda is on vacation, a retreat to a small town. She's hoping to lounge around and maybe go swimming with her daughter Nina. Suddenly, after a few odd run-ins with the locals, she's not feeling so hot. She's feverish and weak. Nina too complains of feeling wobbly, a nightmare when your support system of family and doctors is out of reach. Amanda decides to wait, and that's a mistake. She passes out, and when she wakes up, she's in a clinic, paralyzed, and here we get back to what I formerly introduced. So, hi. I might say that all three books that I've just briefly mentioned were described in the reviews as thrillers, unsettling, darkly absorbing. Samantha, your readers have testified to sweating, checking the locks on the door, skipping sleep, terrified. And Ishai, I can account, I was short of breath and extremely worried about where your plot is going to and what's going to happen. Also because of the suspense, but mostly because the intensity of the existence that you portray. And ladies first, we'll start with you. Your novel in the original title is called Rescue Distance. Mm-hmm. And this is something that is a major part of what builds the tension in your book. So if you care to tell us, what is Rescue Distance?
Okay, hello, thanks to be there. Well, the rescue distance is it's not something that I have invented. It's just something that we know about it. It's just put it a name. And this is, the rescue distance is a mental calculation that a mother or a parent are doing all the time, just calculating how long it would take to run to your kid if something bad happened to him. To there. And of course, to do this exercise, you need to work with the worst case scenarios all the time. It's a kind of obsessing movement that we do. So for example, if your kid is, if you have, as Amanda have a 3-year-old daughter and she's sitting in the edge of the swimming pool with her feet in the water, you could be chatting and sunbathing with your friends, but deep down, all your attention is on the kid. So this is the rescue distance. And of course, sometimes this distance is very short when you feel dangerous, and then you can leave it away if you feel it's a good place to do it.
So Amanda constantly calculates this distance, but sure enough, what do you know? She doesn't manage to keep it because something very unfortunate does happen to her child. And Ishai, in your books, doesn't take the form of a rescue distance, but also you constantly feel that the fathers and also the mothers do not know how to save their kids. In your book, the major character I would point to would be Daphne, but also both your heroes in both novels. Would you care to tell us a little bit about what happened to Daphne?
Daphne is, hi, good afternoon. Daphne is losing touch with her boy, who is already a grown-up. And that's one of my worst nightmares, you know, to lose touch with my kids, to cut the communication lines with them. Because I know quite a lot of examples where kids were lost and it reached the point where the parents couldn't save them anymore. When they recognized the problem, it was too late to deal with it because like almost as Samantha described, metaphorically or not metaphorically, when the children are very small, you keep a real security distance with them. If there is a pool, or they won't get lost, or a road, or anything else from the real dangers. But when they get older or grow up, and they can manage by themselves, they already know to swim, and they can cross the road by themselves, but then it becomes the more dangerous swimming pools or roads, which are the more difficult problems in life. And I think I'm very much obsessed or interested by it, and that's what I described in Limassol. The issue of Daphne, who is a very good person, and couldn't see that he's lost, and when he's lost, it's already too late. So she has to bring people from the outside to help her.
Can you take us a little bit back? What happened when her child was little? Because she gives a detailed account of it, of a baby that wouldn't stop crying, and then, you know, after finding herself rocking his carriage in the middle of the night, completely devoid of sleep, herself, walking around like a zombie, she consulted with a doctor, which would be the responsible thing to do. And what did he tell her?
He told her there is a problem with the boy. By the way, it's amazing because when you describe it, I already in Naomi's kindergarten, I have almost the same character. Forgive me for this, but you know, it's a character that goes almost from book to book, from novel to novel, this troubled boy. And it's always a boy, because somehow I look at the daughters as they can take care of themselves. I don't know, maybe because I know the problematic nature of being a male. And it's always the same story, actually, about those boys, those lost boys, which are not the main characters. I feel as if I have to take care of them during the book. And I have it in along all my books. Also in the third, it's all about, the protagonist is the son, actually, who is a priest, the youngest prince in this kingdom, future kingdom of Judea, who is also a priest. And his whole life is dedicated to his father and to God. So it's always, you have this character around.
So, but I will remind you a little bit about this kid when he was little and crying, and the doctor said to her, you just have to toughen him up. And she says, well, what does it mean? And then he says, don't attend to him when he's crying, let him cry. Eventually he will stop. And he tells her, you know, in the kibbutz, this is what they did. And then the little lords of England were raised that way. That's what you do. And that's what she does. He cries constantly for a long time until he stops. And
by the way, that's a real advice they used to give during the 60s, especially in American guides for young parents. Don't wake up don't take him on your hands, don't touch him, let him cry and it will be over. I think
maybe we have some explanations there to what we're experiencing now. And,
of course, for sure, yeah. Yeah.
So the thing is that is very apparent in your book, which is, by the way, not promoting childbirth in any way, if you ask me, is that how difficult it is for a parent to follow his instincts, to even realize his instincts, to know what's important for his child. And this issue of what is important is something that comes up in your book, Samantha, constantly. A question that David constantly asked Amanda, what is important? What is important? Even when they recount the tale of how they got to this situation, she cannot seem, if when she gets a second chance, she cannot even seem to see where she should have stepped in. It seems like there's a major, in both your writings, a major breakdown of paternal instincts, and that the core experience of it is fear, and then some more fear. Fear and anxiety. This is what you see around you? Samantha.
I don't know. I can answer by myself. It's just in my case. I use literature as a way to understand the things that that are really big question for me, as a reader and as a writer. So, and motherhood, it was a really big question at that time when I was writing this book, maybe the biggest question that I could ask was. would I be been able to survive to my daughter or my son death? And I think that literature is a space to test yourself in any situation. And for me, that was to go through the book.
Experiences through putting your character into it, through it.
In some way,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
And you know, it's interesting because not even, I mean, death is a major catastrophe, but then even when there is this deformed or we're not sure what is wrong with a certain kid that comes into a store, and Amanda looks at her and says, it's good for my Nina to see that not all people are the same, and you know, to experience at least by sight that there are other kinds in the world. And then she says, but honestly, I don't know how, if that was my daughter, how could I have survived that? How could I have done that? I mean, Carla, on the other hand, once her son is poisoned, Carla is David's mother. David has been through poisoning and was treated by a woman. You know what? Tell us a bit about the woman in the greenhouse so we can take it from there. What has happened to David, and what does his mom do in order to save him?
Push us to another question, and this is what is happening in Argentina, no? It's okay to talk about that, or later?
Later.
Okay, so, well, David was poisoned. We don't know why. And then he went to a kind of shaman woman, and what she did was she moved, she said that David has too much poison in his body. So she proposed to divide his soul in two different bodies. And with the soul, he also will divide the poison. So in two bodies, maybe two bodies could fight with this poisoning. So he divided David in two and put one part of this soul in another soul in the same town. So this mother, Carla, kept his whole life like looking in on the others, the kids of the others, trying to understand in which kid this
Half
soul,
of her son's
yes,
soul is.
could be.
Not only that, the shaman lady says to her, a body cannot stay empty. So if I gave a half of his soul to someone else, he will receive a half of another child's soul. And she says, can you make sure that this transaction goes with someone that we know, with a good family, with some... She says, no, and it's better for you not to know who got that, who got his soul and who David's soul. But the thing is, she has her son, he has survived, she was able to save him, but she resents him. It's the same body, the same boy, but she believes that there is a different soul in him, and she doesn't want to mother him anymore. But when Amanda tells her, but Carla, kids are for life, you know, you can't, she says, no, they're not. This is a huge imperative for parents that that Carla breaks. I mean, we're supposed to be in sickness and in health. I mean, where if not there with our children? It seems like the parents, the characters in your book, do not comply with anything that we know or idealize is what parenting is. Did I take it too far, or do you agree?
Being a parent is full of anxiety. Because you see also your fragility through the children. But it's true, when I look into my early childhood, I used to spend every afternoon outside with no mobile phones, no nothing, coming back by dark, 7, 8 o'clock. Nobody was looking for me, hanging around with children, in the park or playing football outside. And everything was just fine. Nowadays, it's much more different. Parents, until the children, I don't know, until they go to the army, must know where they are in every single minute, be in phone touch with them. Everything should be under control. So it's much more different, much different now.
But somehow the anxiety only grew. It seems like it's a
Yeah,
modern day
sure
thing
it grew. Sure it grew. I don't have a good explanation for it. But, and we also are very worried about the implications of our behavior and how we treat our children on their future. Maybe it's the issue of psychology coming more popular, I don't know what. But at least myself, you know, I'm very much aware, sometimes too much, that if I behave in a certain way, you know, my children won't be, you know, will be hurt or something like this. I think we go too far with it. And we shouldn't ignore also the place we're living in and the times we're living in. And this morning when I went out of my home, I thought if there is, you know, a missile rocket from Iran or wherever, you know, in this crazy region and world, where will be every one of the children? Do they have shelter in their schools?
Rescue distance.
Sure, rescue distance, you know, so it's real. I remember when there was in 2014 the last clashes with Gaza with Hamas on Tzuk Eitan. It was every day in Tel Aviv, almost every day issue of where the kids are in a certain point, you know. There was this ridiculous scene that we are going out to the stairs because there is no shelter in our building, and it's very real. So we're looking into a world which is not safe, into atmosphere, psychological atmosphere, into a culture, into society which is not as stable as it used to be.
But it's not only on the outside, because I think this, and this is what is so magnified in your plots, both of you, that it's the loss of instincts. It's not only that there are more hazards or it's more dangerous outside, what the world has come to, etc. It's the parents cannot even rely on their own intuitions, instincts, reflexes. They cannot. In both your books, with you it's with Daphna, with you it's of course with Carla and Amanda. Is it something that you sense?
Yes, absolutely, and I don't think that it's only related with parenthood. It's also related with what kind of things are we dealing as the dangerous things in societies. So I can absolutely see that here in Israel you have more real danger, but in Argentina, for example, the most dangerous things. There are a lot of things dangerous, but for example, my mom could call me at one night and told me, please turn off the Wi-Fi at night because it's dangerous for your brain. You know, it's like, and she's so sure. So and we are full of this ghost in the contemporary life, about enormous monsters that we can't touch, we can't see. So I think that when the enemy is something that you can touch, it's very easy to understand what kind of things you can do to avoid it. But if you don't know where it is, how could you manage to defend it? And I think that when you don't know where the danger is, you get in panic. This is the thing, and maybe it's related with this. That I'm not a mother, but I can imagine that to protect a child in a world that you can't manage to touch what is danger and what is not, it could be absolutely crazy.
You think that too?
Yeah, we have the greatest trauma where we couldn't save or take care of our children in the Holocaust, which is, national, it's in the deepest roots of our psychology. That I talk about it in the Memory Monster, my latest book. When one tries to imagine what happened, it's impossible to imagine. And as you grow up, and I've been there in Poland for the research of the book a few times in recent years, and when you grow up and know the significance of family and children, etc., when you are not a teenager, You cannot grasp the situation, and it lies very deep and very significantly in our minds, this thing.
But this is about us. But I think it is what we're realizing that it's a global thing, actually.
Yeah, it also relates to self-confidence of the parent, and also to the change in the structure of the family. When there was a strong, prominent father figure who dominated the family, he also related to himself according to this structure. He should be strong and keep the facade and don't show any weakness. But nowadays it's not this way anymore.
And your fathers in your book, they cannot even relate to their children. I mean, they see them not very often. They're not bothered by not seeing them. One of them does step to the part when he knows that his son is bullied in school. So this is something practical. As you said, this is a manus that he can put his finger on, and he comes and takes care of it in his own way. But other than that, they're dysfunctional.
By the way, it's contrary to my life. I must defend myself, because
Right.
my wife is not here, so I can tell it, but otherwise she would argue about it. But I'm since my wife is intensive care pediatrician in a hospital, so I take a large part of everyday life with my children. But my protagonists keep a distance from their children because they're afraid.
What are they afraid of?
They're afraid of the responsibility, they're afraid of the hazards, they're afraid of themselves, of what's going on in their minds, of the fear that they'll influence their children badly because of their lousy or dangerous character, so they prefer to keep a distance.
Samantha, you've mentioned it before that you don't have children, and last night you just landed and were immediately rushed to the interviewee chair for the radio. And one of the first questions was, did they ask you how, not being a mother, why would you write about motherhood? And you said that's so annoying that you get that question a lot, and it's annoying because, as you said, that if you write about a killer, it doesn't mean that you have to get up Saturday morning, go kill someone to be able to write about it. And you're absolutely right. But what I'm getting at is in Israel, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, it's the parenting is an imperative. If you choose not to have a child in Israel, it's a sort of a decision that you have to defend perhaps all your life. And I was wondering, I know that for the last few years you've been living in Berlin, and I know that the situation is different, but what is it like in Argentina? Is it...
Well, good question. In Argentina, there is an imperative also, of course. If you have 35 or 40 and you don't have any children, people start to ask you. But there is also a new reality fighting with this imperative. I told you last night that half of my friends are not mothers. And we are 40.
In Argentina too?
In Argentina, and we are 40. So, of course, my friends are writers, journalists, artists. It's a particular part of the society, but I think it's something that has changed a lot, these two last generations.
Does it surface, or is it just the way it is? Or is it upfront? Is it something that is discussed among women in Argentina nowadays?
I think that we are just in the edge that maybe the culture, maybe we still didn't realize about this.
Okay.
Because at least in Argentina, we still could have children, but I know that they don't want any children. So, and then there is another difference that between Argentina and Berlin. In Berlin, people have even less children.
Yes.
But I have 40, sorry, and I still could have children from a German point of view. In Argentina, it's too late. So you can see how cultural this thing is. Strange.
We have a long way to go here. I'm sure about that. I want to talk about another safety distance as writers. Ishai, in your books, the political, geopolitical, historical setting is almost a character. I mean, your books cannot be written about anywhere else than where they are. Your novel, on the other hand, when I read it the first time, I read it twice. The first time I read it, to me, I perceived it as a parable, as an allegory about parenthood, about the global hazards. Only after you gave a fascinating interview in Ynet last week, I realized that this has a very, very concrete reality behind it in Argentina. And if you would care to tell us a little bit about this. And
yes, of course. Well, what happened in Argentina is not a good news. We are at this moment a kind of giant experiment in the world about genetically modified farming, and these huge lands are being fumigated with very, very strong chemicals over the houses of the people who work there. Once these chemicals is on the floor, it travels in 2 hours to the city by the ground water. It has changed a little bit. I think the situation is going a little bit better because it's more regulated now. But when I started to work on the novel, the situation was a complete disaster. In fact,
we're talking what? 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
5 years ago. The Hague Tribunal called what is happening in Argentina an ecocide. So you can imagine how big this is. People suffer from cancer, and it's very difficult to show that this cancer coming from these chemicals, because you need like 2 generations of people who is dead to show that you have the reason. It's crazy that if you put a product like that in the market, you as the company are not the one who have to show that this is safe. And in place of that, it is the human being, the people who have to show that they are killing them for generations and generations. But about your question that you didn't realize about all these things, it was in some way part of the plan. It was a big dilemma for me, because the novel, this is the story about a woman. It's about motherhood. It's very personal. So, and my character doesn't know anything about all these things. That was the trick of the situation. So the novel, there was not way to start to inform with the novel, to tell what is happening. The novel just reject all this information. So I asked myself as a writer, I am going to talk about this, nobody is talking about this, and I am not going to say names, government, the names of the companies, numbers, statistics. And then I remember that I myself as a reader, I never remember about number. I never remember about names, statistics, nothing like that. But if I feel real fear, I Google it immediately.
You managed to do that, let me tell you. Yeah.
So that was the thing. So that was the thing. That was my necessity to push so much the reader, to show him how quickly it can touch you and kill you if you are not well informed.
But do you care for both of the readings? I mean, do you realize how different it is if you read it as an Argentinian that knows or has a sense of a hunch even of what you're talking about, or an Israeli who has It's completely in the dark?
No, I knew that it would be a huge amount of reader that will be lost in this topic, but that was the reason, because I work in a novel who can survive even if you don't have this information. So it's not the most important topic of the novel, but it's there in the background.
Like that, or I mean, are we not stressing the context in that way?
It's very interesting to hear you, because it's like, you know, in a dentist conference, when you talk about different techniques to repair a tooth or something, it's exactly like it is, you know, because it's always a dilemma and the choice you have to make before starting writing a new novel. The most important choice, a matter of style, and whether you want to be abstract about things or go into specifics. You know, I always have the urge to write something, you know, detached from Israeli life, you know, like Kafka's The Process, you know, the trial of Kafka, you know, but when you learn about Kafka, about, you know, working as a lawyer in an insurance company, you understand when it comes from, but then he wrote this masterpiece, which can happen everywhere. So it's always a choice. In the end, I write something that is close to my heart and which I feel comfortable with, and maybe too comfortable, that's right. And something I would like to read as a reader. But when I read Samantha's novel in the last days, in the excellent translation of Adam Blumenthal, you know, that's a lesson. You think about it. You know, it's a very important professional thing, a very important professional lesson to learn and think about it. Maybe I'll do something like this. It's important to hear about your dilemmas. And, but you always gain something and lose something by every choice you make.
By the way, I'm curious, did your book promote any change in the situation? I mean, did it bring it into awareness?
It's difficult to say. Of course, it was good to see the literary press and the news press working together, you know, because one talk about the other. So I think that was good to bring the news to the literary world and to bring some literature to the news. But at the end, I think that people talked more about the book than about the problem. So I don't know. And of course, it's not, I think this is just, I don't know the name, something that I suppose, I don't know, but I think it's not the more favorite topics of the press and of the official press, at least, so.
I want to talk a little bit about form. There's another lesson to be taken from your book, is how to make something very, very complicated, readable. You open up both of you always open in what we call medias res, in the middle of things, and we have to break our head what is going on. You do it, and you do it, and you even took it a step higher. Before we even know who is talking, they're talking. It opens in a dialogue. Actually, I have it down. It goes, someone says, we don't know who. They're like worms. Another person asks, what kind of worms? Like worms all over. This is it. This is what you get. I mean, as a starting point. How important is it to you to disorient your reader before you orient him? I mean, is it something that you think about? You do it on purpose? Is it part of creating tension? How do you approach it? Well, I mean, you could open in so many ways, and then you repeatedly choose to open vaguely.
Well, it is, I don't know,
will give me time to
Okay, okay. Maybe the question would be, at least for me, what is really important, as David asked. Because I think, at least in this life that we all are living, maybe the most important things that you should do as a writer is to really grab the reader, you know. So for me, tension is just like a pact that I need to do with the reader. You know, something like convince him really quickly that I have some information and it's good information, and if he keep with me, he will get it. You know, so maybe. Worms are not the most important things in the novel. I think it's not important at all. But, you know, if I say it's like worms, what kind of worms? It's worms all over. It's just, you need to know more about this. Yeah. So this, you know, in Argentina we have a saying that is that, it's not a saying, in fact it's real, that we say that when you ride a horse for the first time, the horse takes 5 seconds, just 5 seconds, to decide if he was the one who will drive you or you are the one who would drive him. So just 5 seconds. And the thing is that if you didn't do it well and you came back 5 years later, he remember you, and he know that he had decided that you are not a good driver, a good reader. And so I think that with writers it happened the same, at least for me as a reader. So I put all my trust in the first sentence when I read a new writer, but if I get distracted, or if I don't understand something, if something goes wrong, I quit. I immediately quit. I'm a very bad reader. But I trust in this, you know, it's like, I think it was Kurt Vonnegut that had said, don't waste the reader's time. So, I don't know.
I'll add something before you answer. I mean, but I can easily think of amazing writers that do it very orthodoxly. Like, for example, Philip Roth will always give you a proper introduction of what he's going to talk about, etc.
Yes, of course.
So it's just interesting to me when you sit down to write something, how if you make a decision to do it that way. Or it's something that just more intuitive. You just roll along with it and play it by ear, as we say. Yeah, Yishai.
I need to enter myself, to bring myself into the story first, before I think about the reader. And I think about the scene where I get into it, you know, suddenly drop from space into this scene and be there and start going on from there. And of course, it has to grasp the attention of the reader. But then I'm a little bit angry about it, you know, because I always want to make the classic introduction, you know, Thomas Mann introduction about the characters, about the family, about the protagonist, all his history. But I know that nowadays it will be difficult, and I'm not happy about it, you know, because we are dealing with readers. At least we consider to have very short patience, very much influenced by TV series, you know, that you have to start with a blow or a murder or something very dramatic. And that's kind of also a competition between writers and those other genres. And so...
You hijack them with the distribution of information, you say...
Yeah, you must get in because something very interesting, or, you know, to raise their curiosity towards what's happening. But I'm not very happy about it. It's sometimes it feels, I'm talking about my writing, as a cheap trick to to start things, and you are looking for other days, you know, when writers had maybe a larger freedom to design and form things more freely, and not to be in a competition for somebody's attention so much.
So let's go back to the natural process. When you start off a book, what starts you off on a book? I mean, is it a scene? Is it an image, a dialogue, a theme, a feeling? What? Samantha?
Well, as I completely agree with you. For me, it's really important to really understand what I am going to talk about before even put the pencil on the paper. Maybe this is another reason because we start media res, as you said. How did you? Media res. So we know a lot about that when we start to write. What I need is a feeling, but it's a very specific feeling, you know, and this is the thing that I don't change in the whole process. This is like a particular point of feeling that I want to go.
In Fever Dream, what was that? What was it?
This last moment that you realize that maybe what had pushed you to the death is not your problem, is a huge problem about the whole humanity, and you know, like I don't know the name, like post-Holocaustic feeling, you know. So I don't know. If I keep with this feeling, I feel free to change anything, you know, the plot, the characters, whatever.
That's beautiful.
I completely free to look at the way to go there. And for me, it's a kind of, it's like an exercise of exorcism, you know, you have this feeling, you feel so discomfort, and you put this in the reader. You know, it's not your problem anymore. So this is the process for me.
Beautiful. Shai?
I'm trying to create a world which will be most of the time strange to me, but also that I know something about it, in which I'll be able to maneuver my feelings, my anxieties, my traumas, my story quite freely, and hide behind certain characters, disguise myself and split myself to, you know, play with this thing, which is very entertaining and fun. And I need it to be important for myself, because otherwise I have a full day job, you know, so I am not a full-time writer, and if it's not interesting and grasping to me, I won't do it.
Also, I think it seems like you make a point of exploring something completely new every time.
Yeah, also style, like, I try to change the style from a book to a book. I want it to be fun for myself, you know, that's the most important thing maybe. And then technically I already know after 5 novels that it's kind of an independent mental mechanism which is not in my control. I cannot hasten it anyway, and usually it goes that I goes with 4, 5, 6 alternative plots going in my mind, and in the end somehow it merges into one. Most of the things are left outside, but somehow it goes to one line, which I then can start writing it.
I want to take you to your present days, living in Berlin. First of all, how did you get there?
My name?
Well, I was invited to a writing program, 1-year writing program from the German government. And during this year, I really fall in love with the city. I found a really big bubble of Spanish speakers, even Argentinian people who lived there.
Really?
And I started to give some workshops, literary workshops in Spanish. And at the end of this year, I realized that it would be more difficult to cut all these things and came back to Argentina than stay in Germany. I was so involved with everything. And I feel that...
You speak German, by the way?
No, I wouldn't say that. I understand a little bit. I can manage to do my shopping, but German is something really difficult, and I haven't studied it properly. The truth is that when I arrived to Germany 6 years ago, I didn't even speak English. I was a kind of language analphabet or something like that. So, I think it felt at that moment really important to be away, just being away. Buenos Aires is a great city. I love Buenos Aires. It's not related with my country. It's just the feeling that you choose your place and you start again. And it was so, I don't know, it was really important for me. You know, I realized, for example, it's a very small thing, but you can imagine how expand this to. I realized, for example, that my apartment, the apartment that I had in Buenos Aires, was full of furniture. But this furniture, I hadn't choose by myself. It was my mom who gave me the sofa, and then came a friend and gave me a horrible table. When I realized that I was in Berlin, choosing for the first time my own things, it was so, I don't know, something woke up. It was very good. And also,
so of course, you have to tell me how did it apply to the writing? Did you get a new look on your writing there?
It was
amazing. Being far away from your language.
The two first years, the first 2 years was the most productive years of my life up to now.
Really?
It was amazing, yes. And yes, because your world became very small because you don't have your family there. Your friends are new, but just a little one. So you work a lot. And you live like in a bubble. And it was very intriguing in a literary way to go the whole day through a world that you can't understand. Just to go and do some shopping without understanding what the things are for. It's very, I don't know, it was very interesting.
So did you feel it clarifying your writing in a way? I mean, it helps you.
I think it gets you concentrated.
Yeah.
You know, you go to a cafe to work a little bit, and people could be talking, but it's just noise for you. You can't manage to understand what they are saying.
Yes.
So, and of course, it's also a very productive world, but a dangerous world. Because you are not involved, you don't have roots. You are there, and people don't know that you are there. So you are a kind of invisible. But I think that being an author is in some way to being a foreign, even when you live in your own country. So it's.
Of course, you wouldn't think of writing not in Spanish, right? I mean, that's not
Spanish,
an option.
of course.
We have this song by Shlomo Yidov. He's also born in Argentina. That wrote that he lives in Hebrew, he loves in Hebrew, etc., etc. But then at night he always dreams in Spanish. And that when it comes to to the intuition, it can only speak Spanish. And can you imagine yourself living anywhere out of Israel and writing? Or do you need this
I don't know. I don't have this experience. It can be a very interesting experience. I really don't know how it will look like, you know. It's you always want to do something new, something wild, to break your own barriers, which may be possible, may be easier when you're outside of your regular
circles?
But that's maybe that's why I, go to remote places in my books, to the temple, or to Poland or to other places, because at least in my imagination I can
Secret
be.
Service.
Or to the Secret Service, yeah.
Underworld. Yes.
Even though I had some connection with them, it's not so strange to me. So, that's the adventure, going somewhere remote. But it's a good question.
So you're going remotely to go back to Argentina, and you stay here and write. Listen with the time, because I want to know.
I'm the time person.
You're the time person? Good.
6:30.
Wow, already?
Yes.
We're done?
No, we're not done. Go ahead. Why? Nobody
supposed-
looks in a hurry,
5 more minutes? Wow, so what do I choose? Then let's just have a little bit, Hollywood here. What was it like to be nominated for the Man Booker? Tell us, please. I know we know David Grossman snatched it away from you, but it's like the Oscars, right?
Yes, that when I knew about that, when I realized about this, I was so calm. And then a very good friend of mine started to shouting at me like this is like the Oscar, you don't understand. Well, of course, I was so honored to be among these huge, enormous authors. Because even, for example, Amos Oz or David Grossman, I think they are even authors that formed me. I remember when I read the Black Cage. I don't know if the translation is the same, or from Amos Oz. Or when I read, I don't know the translation again, but
Woman Running from.
Yes, exactly,
Chaplin
amazing book.
Limassol.
For me, they were great authors. And maybe because of that, I also didn't really confess you, I really didn't expect to join, to win the prize. I think that for me the prize was to be shortlisted. That was the prize and was amazing. So I could see everyone was so nervous. And I was so calm because my prize was already there. So I really enjoy everything. And I could see how important it was for the book. It was really, 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 really important. And then I realized just a week ago in this interview that you told me, because the journalist asked me about how David Grossman could influence me, and then I made this click, that you realize. I read, do you remember the first pages of this Woman Runs from, I don't know the title in English. Okay, in these first pages, there is a little girl who is talking with a little boy in a hospital, just like murmuring like this. And then I remember I was talking about this scene and I said, this is like fever dream. And this is amazing. I don't know the name, but there is a name for this. And some scientists have studied how creations...
Great creations. Yes.
Creations...
take place in different sides of the universe at the same time.
No, but no. Even how some pieces of art can influence you. And they said that if you remember it can't influence you. It's not that you steal, but... you remember it, so you can't transform it. But if you don't remember, it's just, something that is lost. You can really take it and put you in your way, in other story, or transform it. It's amazing how this works. So when he talked about this novel, I realized that this voice, David's voice, maybe is something related with this.
It's a beautiful story. So we managed to take you to the Israeli point, as we like to do at the end of the course. Thank you. I mean, I had many more questions, but our time is up. And thank you so much, Samantha Chaplin.
Thanks for your questions.
Ishai.
Thank you.
For your company.
Thank you.